We have two different scripture lessons for this morning. We're going to start in the book of Proverbs. We very seldom read a big chunk of Proverbs. Part of it is you might have intellectual overload. Proverbs is best taken in little bite-sized pieces, which is why we're going to read 1 and 2, 8, 9, 22, and 23. The whole book is laid out in these couplets, and the whole thing is, well, as it says, it's Proverbs, it's sort of words of wisdom. And so, listen for these words of wisdom. A good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold. Rich and poor have this in common. The Lord is maker of them all. And continuing at 8. He who sows wickedness reaps trouble, and the rod of his fury will be destroyed. A generous man will himself be blessed, for he shares his food with the poor. And at 22. Do not exploit the poor because they are poor. Do not crush the needy in court. For the Lord will take up their case and will plunder those who plunder them. These are important and little pithy statements that none of them do we say, there's a new idea. But for all of them, we need those reminders. And it's very wise that the lectionary creators put those words first before we go ahead and read Mark 7, 24 to 37. I will admit to you that the first section of what we're going to read includes Jesus saying some words that we don't really want to hear Jesus say. I always hate it and love it when this scripture comes up in the lectionary because I don't want to hear Jesus say this. And yet I want us to hear this. Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre and Sidon. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an evil spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was Greek, born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. First, let the children eat all they want, he told her. For it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Yes, Lord, she replied. But even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he told her, for such a reply you may go, the demon has left your daughter. And so she went home and found her child lying on the bed, and the demon was gone. Then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon, down to the Sea of Galilee and into the region of the Decapolis. Here some people brought up to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk. They begged him to place his hands on the man. After he took him aside, away from the crowd, Jesus put his fingers into the man's ears. He spit and he touched the man's tongue. He looked up at heaven and said with a deep sigh to him, Ephatha, which means be opened. At this, the man's ears were opened. His tongue was loosened, and he began to speak plainly. Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone. But the more he did so, the more they kept talking about it. People were overwhelmed and amazed. He has done everything well, they said. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak. May God bless to our understanding these words. I hate hearing Jesus say this to this woman. First, let the children eat all they want, for it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Now, it's not like we're missing something. It's not like 2,000 years ago calling somebody a dog was a good thing. Perhaps it was actually even worse then than it is now. And so because I hate this so much, I'm just going to leave this up. No, I'm kidding. But what I am going to do is I'm going to talk about the second half of our scripture first, because these two stories happen side by side for a reason. Just as a little bit of a reminder, this is the book of Mark. Most scholars agree that Mark was the earliest written gospel, written by a person named John Mark, we think, and written mostly from the eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life, most of which came from Peter. So John Mark may or may not have hung around with Jesus, may or may not have met him, but what we're pretty confident in is the things he wrote came from the people who were there. Which is good and it's bad. It's good that we're getting sort of the raw facts. It's bad because then we can't slough off the stuff that Jesus said as, oh, somebody must have interpreted it wrong. But this second story about the man who couldn't hear and couldn't speak, I want to talk about that first. Because we talk about these healing miracles that Jesus did, and they're important. It's important for us to know that Jesus has the ability to perform miracles. Jesus has the ability to change lives. Jesus has the ability and the will and the desire to make a difference for those people who need a difference. But this story, it sounds different than other healing miracles. A couple of things. We have this man who is deaf and cannot speak. And like I was just talking about with the kids, being in a crowd would have been the worst place ever. Being surrounded by all this energy and motion and sound and not being able to hear it all. Can you imagine being in a crowd where suddenly everybody in the crowd turns to look because they heard something and you're like, I don't know what that was. And then the person next to you says, don't you see he's coming? And you're like, I can't imagine what it would be like to be in a crowd, being unable to hear and unable to speak. And in that moment, as this man's friend brought him to Jesus begging for healing, he knew. And he took that man out of the crowd to a quiet spot where they could be one-on-one, where they could make contact, where they could have an intimate moment. And it was even more intimate than that. We know of other times that Jesus healed, and he said things like, go in faith, your faith has healed you. Or he said things like, go and wash yourself in the pool and you'll come out clean. Or he said things like, your faith has healed your son. Or he went and he held the girl's hand and said, wake. But this time, he made it personal. He put his fingers in the man's ears. He spat and he put his hand on the man's tongue. Sometimes when Jesus wants to change our lives, he has to get up in our faces and do it one-on-one. I don't think it's accidental that Mark put that story right after the story of the Syrophoenician woman. Sometimes when Jesus is looking to change lives, he gets right up in our face, and he does it. Commentators and interpreters and Bible scholars have argued and struggled and worked for decades and centuries with Jesus' words to that woman. We know that Jesus was a Jew and she was a Greek. We know that the Jews were pretty certain that they were the called people of God, that they were God's favorites, and the rest of the world, well, they got the scraps off the table. We know that that was what was there culturally, but we don't want to hear Jesus say it. Do any of you have that friend or that relative who every now and again they say something and you're embarrassed for them? And you never know whether to call them out in the moment and embarrass them or to to take them aside and say, it's 2018, you can't say that. We kind of want to go to Jesus and say, even if you're thinking it, you're not allowed to call the Greeks dogs. I mean, not to their faces anyhow, come on. We really don't want Jesus. This person who we stand up as being the perfect example of caring and love. Of all the people we don't want to have saying this, he's the top of the list. Interpreters have done a lot of different things with this. Some of them I agree with, some of them I don't. And a lot of them are going to disagree with what I'm about to say. So I'm okay with you disagreeing too. But I think that the reason that Jesus said that was not at all for the woman. Maybe a little bit. Some people argue that he maybe said it with a wink and a nudge so that she knew he was joking, but his disciples didn't. That's been one line. Maybe he was being sarcastic to kind of call it out, but there's no sarcasm font in the Bible, so we can't really tell. But I think for sure that Jesus was saying that because that was what was on the minds of the people who were listening. And when we hear our racist friend making racist comments, doesn't it hurt us too? I mean, it hurts us to hear it, but doesn't it hurt us also because we're reminded that every now and again those thoughts are in our head too? See, sometimes when Jesus wants to change us, he's got to get right up in our faces. He's got to stick his fingers in our ears and say, you can't listen to that junk in your life. He's got to spit and put his hand on her tongue and say, you can't say those things. I think it's beautiful, this woman who went to Jesus for help, for support, went to him because nobody else could do what she needed. Nobody else could drive the demon out of her kid. Nobody else had any hope of helping. And the first words she hears from Jesus is, can't help you, you're like a dog. She says, but sir, even the dogs get the crumbs from the children's table. Too many times I have heard people use words that fit in the same category. I'm going to repeat some of them, and I'm going to apologize up front because some of them are going to sound familiar. You might have heard them, you might have said them, you might have thought them. Can you imagine if Jesus was the one saying, see, I would love to help him and I know that he needs help, but if I give him money, he's just going to use it on drugs. Can you imagine if it was Jesus, the person that we stand up as being pure and faultless, who says, why the heck are we paying for Syrian refugees when we can't even help our own veterans? Jesus spoke this to shake us. Jesus said this because he wanted to catch us out in the things that we think and that we say. Jesus wanted to remind us that it is our job to fight injustice. In this case specifically, the injustice that leads to people being the bottom of the heap. The injustice that leads to people not being able to feed their own kids. People fleeing from countries they have known their entire lives because if they stay, they'll die. The injustice that leads people to be poor. When I say poor, you have an idea in your head automatically of what that means. You have a picture, perhaps, of somebody pushing a shopping cart with all their worldly goods in it. Perhaps poor means to you a person who sleeps in the garden out here because there's nowhere else to sleep. Perhaps poor means the people who show up around here on Wednesday mornings to get food. But there are an awful lot of other types of poor in this world. There are people who are poor in resources. There are people who are poor because they don't have the mental or physical capabilities to meet their own needs. And all of these people suffer injustice, and sometimes at our hands. So when we hear Jesus calling the Greek woman a dog, saying what all the disciples were thinking, but had that moment of, Jesus, you can't say that. He's getting right up in our faces, grabbing us by the ears or the tongues and saying, open up. Open up your mind. Open up your hearts. Open up your lives to the people who need help. I hate this scripture because it reminds me of who I am. Thanks be to God.
Hi there, I'm Greg Simpson. I'm the minister here at St. Andrew's United Church in Chatham, Ontario. Thank you so much for watching our video. We hope that you enjoyed it. If you'd like to be notified when we upload new content, just click the subscribe button below and the little bell next to it, then it'll send you an email. But we'd really love to meet you in person sometime, so if you'd like to, or if you're in the Chatham area, drop by a church service. We meet at 10:30 on Sunday mornings at the corner of Wellington and William Street in Chatham. Hope to see you soon.